Greetings, intelligent creatures. So, I recently just published a glossary of terms on my website. Put a link in the description if you're curious. Um, these are words that, not just any words, but words that I try to use when discussing intelligent behavior. I really try to commit to only using words that are clear and rigorously defined, and that also makes sense cross discipline. I want this to make sense whether you're in AI research, neuroscience, psychology, or some other behavioral science. But I'm not going to read through the glossary. Don't worry, that's super boring. um, what I want to talk about are the words that I didn't put in. Welcome to Behavioral Logic, this podcast where I talk about whatever is currently inspiring me about intelligent behavior in theory, practice, computers, and neuroscience. So today, I really want to talk about these words that are really commonly used. You hear them a lot in discussions surrounding intelligence and consciousness, but that I'm mindfully choosing to not include because they're outdated, there are better alternatives, or they're just too ambiguous to bring much clarity when they're used. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that you should never use these words, but if we are in a rigorous discussion, I might ask for clarification, and then we'll get into a whole thing. So this way we'll all be on the same page. Unless we're in just a casual conversation, then it probably doesn't matter. I mean, unless you're using the words that really trigger me, and I confess I will be giving you some ammunition if we're out having a beer and you really want to piss me off. So, not all of these words are horrible. Some of them are just a little, they could be better. And so each word I'm going to tell you sort of the severity of how awful I think they are, and maybe some other terms that we can use, and then I'm going to go into the reasons why. The lowest severity, I do my best to not use these words when I'm trying to be rigorous. But if in casual conversation, everybody knows what they mean, and I'm not going to be pedantic about it. Sort of medium bad words are just a little too ambiguous, and I believe they require more information to specify exactly what the heck it is you're talking about. There's really no shame in using them as long as you're willing to get more precise if that's required. And there are several terms that I hate. I hate these words. They have no value in them. And if I hear you using them, I'm going to assume that you're not discussing anything in good faith and just barfing out a bunch of word salad. If you use these in front of me, you risk getting a very boring and condescending lecture. And nobody wants that. I will try to offer alternatives, unless it's so bad that don't even try. So let's get started. First, there is the term emotion. Now, I've already made a 40-minute video about this, and why I think emotions aren't real. It's a dumb term. Don't use it. But of course, I use this all the time in casual conversation. Everybody knows what it means to be emotional and what kind of emotions are. I just don't think that it has scientific rigor. So if you're just using it in normal conversation, it's not a big deal. If you're using it in a scientific paper or textbook, shame on you. There's so many better words. You could use mood or feeling, or even talk about the specific emotion. Is it fear? Is it sadness? I don't know. Or one of those other emotions. I'm sure there are more. Anger and sarcasm. Those are my two emotions. I don't think sarcasm's an emotion, but no, there are no emotions. I take that back. So, um, I'm not going to talk about this one too much more. There's a whole video. You know what? I'll put a link in the description later if I remember it. Um, the next word that is decidedly not in my dictionary is ego. This is a part of psychoanalysis, Freudian lingo, along with id, superego, subconscious, and things like that. And I'm not using this because I think it's a bad idea. It just doesn't fall into what I'm doing. I haven't really found a use for it. Um, if I knew anything about Freudian analysis, maybe I would. But this one is just, I just don't use this lingo. I come at intelligent behavior from, I would say, maybe a different perspective. And, you know, if you know something about Freudian analysis and the ego and the id and all that penis envy, whatever it is that Freud's into, Oedipus complexes, I think I've just exhausted all of my Freudian knowledge right there. I guess I should have paid more attention in Psych 101. But yeah, I mean, enlighten me. I'm interested, but not so interested. You know, I'm going to learn it on my own. The next terminology. You know what? I don't like this. Look at that. Let's see if we can make that a little more legible. Oh yeah, there we go. Motivation or drive. I see these. This is something that I see in neuroscience textbooks, and whenever I see it, it really bothers me. Um, because they never say what it means. And then I go to the glossary and it doesn't say what it means. And I go online and it doesn't say what it means. Are we talking about desire? I mean, desire, I think, is something that makes sense, especially in terms of having a goal and wanting to accomplish that goal. Um, but I don't know. There's really no desire center in the brain. I don't think a goal is just sort of more of a, you know, the sum of the parts. Um, in Neuroscience Online, which is my favorite online neuroscience resource, I think it's fantastic. But it says things like this. So in chapter 12, um, here's a quote. The ventral striatum, particularly the nucleus accumbens, has been shown to be actively involved in appetitive aspects of motivation. Damn if I know what that means. It would be cool. It'd be cool to find out. There must be some sort of experiment that relates to this somehow. And then instead of just telling us what happened, you know, they're waxing poetic. I get it. You know, your neuroscience students, they tend to fall asleep and you want to say something that sounds really deep and intellectual. But I guess I'd like more specifics. I don't really know what that does. Um, I mean, is there unmotivated behavior? Would that be an instinct? I mean, does it are we talking about like the somatomotor system? Is motivated behavior just sending signals to motor neurons? Again, I don't know. I have not been able to figure it out. There may be a rigorous definition for this. I haven't found it yet. If I do, maybe I'll include it, but I have found no use for it. On to the next word that I dislike. All right, I don't dislike the word memory. I use it. It's a good term. Unfortunately, it can mean so much. So much that when you use it, it's impossible to tell what are you talking about? What sort of memory? Um, if you are using the word memory, stop and think about what kind of memory you're talking about, and it, because it's important. I mean, I guess I didn't include this because it's so important that we need to do better. Uh, Really, as far as I can tell, all memory is just persistent information. Um, could persist for years. It could persist for microseconds. That's all memory. And there's many different processes in the brain that use it. In fact, if you consider memory as something that persists even for a short time, I could argue that all processes in the brain use some type of memory, whether it's just sort of a read-only memory that was programmed in by genetics, or the persistence of sensory memory for that moment that just before it disappears. So, I mean, it's common to talk about short-term or working memory and long-term memory. But there's way more than that. Many different types of long-term memory uh, are involved in all sorts of things. And there's probably way more than we even know about. Here's a few examples. So, episodic memory, very important type of long-term memory. It's described sort of as being able to picture a time and place that you were where something happened. I think of it in terms of more of a rigorous data structure where you have an initial situation, a something happens, an action, and then a consequent situation. What changes? How does that change? But there's also semantic memory. All of the facts that you know, all of the words that you know how to define, like all of these words I'm talking about now, um, are stored in your brain, and we can learn new ones and recall them quite easily. And it has been shown through damage to the brain. Certain times you can go in and you could damage things, wipe out your semantic memory. No, you have no idea what words mean. The left parietal lobe right in here, there's this area called Wernicke's area. And if you get damage to that, you can no longer use words, but you can still remember everything. And then if there's damage to, say, the hippocampus, so where is that? Yeah, it's way deep in here. And the temporal lobe, that can inhibit recalling any kind of episodic memory, but all your semantic memories, they're still fine, and you can continue to learn more. So that's cool. But even beyond that, I mean, those are sort of two of the big ones. But beyond that, all habits that you learn, good or bad, are a type of persistent information. Any skills that you learn. Kinesthetic memory is often used when you learn a physical skill and you can sort of perform it without even thinking at a very high level. And this is involved with operant conditioning, but there's also classical conditioning, which is a totally separate type of memory where you associate positive and negative feelings with objective conditions. So if you are ever thinking about saying or writing something like some neural structure is involved in learning and memory, of course it is. All neural structures are involved in memory, but what would be really surprising if you could find a structure in the brain that had nothing to do with any type of persistent information, well, that would be a discovery. I'd be interested in hearing that. But other than that, no memory. Say specifically what you mean, kind of like emotions. If you mean fear or anger or sadness or surprise or joy or whatever else is in Inside Out, just say that. Those are very, very different things. And if you can't be more specific, maybe you should just stop. Damn, I'm brutal here. I I mean, I guess yeah. I these are pet peeves of mine. Some of them are. Some of them are just things that maybe I haven't found a place for yet, but a few of them piss me off. And this is one of them. Though I try not to get too pissed off. This is stimulus response is a standard kind of psychological behavioral sort of terminology. Um, and I get it. We all learn it. We all know what it means. But I never say stimulus. I say situation. I say conditions. Why? Um, well, I guess, I mean, it is a personal pet peeve. I don't know if I can make a case that it's legitimately terrible, but I believe I can make a case that it is at least misleading. That, so, information. Oh, look, it's Kede time. Come here, Kede. Come on. You want to be part of the show? Come on over. I'll hold your feet. Okay. Yeah, there you go. What a sweetie. So information presented to an intelligent creature, that information is not doing the stimulating. All right, a creature's brain, like this little creature, they are actively paying attention for specific information. And these conditions that they're listening for aren't stimulating anything. They are passive. The environment is passive. And it is in the minds of the creatures to actively recognize any of these conditions. And when what I really dislike about this, it sounds like semantics, and maybe it is, but I feel like, first off, this is comes sort of from physics, where you say, "Oh, right, I have an object, and you drop. Oh, it's potential energy, and then you drop it, and it's kinetic energy, and things happen, forces happen to rigid bodies, and that's how physics works. But that is not how intelligent creatures work. Well, it is. I mean, you could always pick one of us up and here, I'm just going to pick you up. Ugh. Um, and yeah, see, you didn't even fight back. And yeah, we follow the laws of physics. We are beholden to them, but we're not just beholden. We are not only beholden to the laws of physics. We also have agency. Intelligent creatures choose to act or not act. And when you talk about stimulus response, that's, to me, stimulus versus conditions. If you're like, oh, that's not really a big difference, I would say, do you think there's a big difference if somebody jumped or was pushed? I do. I think it's pretty important. And I don't think that I think we need to use terminology that respects the agency of intelligent creatures and not treats them like, a ball on an inclined plane. Next, we're going to talk about higher intelligence. I really don't like. I I say I will never use the term higher intelligence, and here I am using it. So it's like, yeah, but I'm using it ironically. Um, I This is something that I think it's not so much a pet peeve, but if you use this, I will judge you that you don't really know what you're talking about. And I'll explain why. And that's why I mentioned lizard brain. So there is this concept of the triune brain. This is an archaic model of the brain that states we have this reptilian complex, often the basal ganglia, but who knows? I mean, it's very non-scientific. And then above that, we have the paleomammalian complex or the limbic system. And then above that, we have the neomammalian complex, the neocortex. Um, it makes sense at first, and I think this is where one of the places that higher intelligence comes from is that you see the more internal parts of our brain that are for reflexes and instinct, and then there parts are out there that are more habit forming and conditioned behavior. But then there's the ones on top, the ones on the outside, the neocortex. We associate this with thinking and with decision making and understanding the world. And yeah, that makes sense. Even my own theories of intelligence that we have reflexes, conditioned behavior, and conscious thought echo this exactly, which is why it's so tempting to think about the brain this way when the brain does not work that way at all. Um, so let's see. Let me explain a few things. First off, um, the reptilian brain is wrong because we look at reptiles as only creatures of instinct. You know, they're like robots. They don't have feelings or thoughts or they can't learn. Yeah, well, until you go and watch Ackie monitors, or there are some really smart reptiles. Mostly lizards. Lizards are the smartest reptiles. Snakes, I think they're dumb as rocks. But some of the big lizards, scary intelligent, and they can learn, and we know that they can learn. But beyond that, uh, did you know that behavioral scientists do classical and operant conditioning experiments on fruit flies? That's right. So we know that even fruit flies have conditioned behavior. Even fruit flies can learn and improve their behavior through feedback. Even fruit flies have feelings of positive and negative feelings. They respond to punishment and reward. So saying that the lizard brain is so low, this is a fly brain is even higher than what was described in this triune brain kind of concept. And like Kitty knows that if he wants my attention, just get up there. You're rubbing your face on the camera. You, you are a rascal. Um, but I have more bad news. All right, the fruit fly, we have their brain completely mapped. We know every single neuron in a fruit fly's brain. It's nice and simple. They still learn and have conditioned behaviors. There are people doing conditioned behavior experiments on plants. Okay? Even plants have conditioned behavior. So any kind of belief that there are creatures with only instincts, I mean, maybe single-celled creatures. You would have to go probably that small in order to find intelligent creatures that only acted on instinct, only acted on reflex. So that right there is a really big blow to the triune brain. And but it's not. It's there are other reasons why it's a terrible idea. I mentioned, the paleomammalian complex, the limbic system. This is people used to think that there was a thing called the limbic system. It's not. It's not real. It's archaic. It's been shown not to be a real thing. And we used to believe this thing that isn't real was involved with emotion. And I already talked about emotion. So you're saying, oh, this structure that doesn't really exist is involved with this kind of mental states that don't exist. Yeah, that's sort of a waste of time too. So I'm going to say that the severity of this is high. Ironic, I know, higher intelligence, high severity, but it is factually wrong, And if we do meet and you say that you're going to get a lecture, don't derail. Don't ruin everybody's fun with this. Um, I do think that if you want to say higher intelligence, maybe just say consciousness, conscious thought, decision making. Those are all good. If you want, instead of emotional and stuff and the limbic system, talk about conditioned behavior, or if you want to talk about reflexes and instincts, say those. Say those specific things. Don't try to relate them to specific parts of the brain because they don't line up and they don't make sense. So go ahead and be warned. All right, now we're going to do a speed round of a bunch of words that I'm just going to complain about really quick. That I don't know if they require a whole section. First off, feed forward. I do see this a lot. This comes from control theory, which is this really cool mathematics that's often used in. Do this little kitty adjusted my camera stinker. Um, yeah, control theory is valuable. I've used it in practice, and I've worked on things with PID controllers and stuff like that. The problem is that in control theory does not really map to intelligent behavior because it always starts with sort of a perfect understanding of the environment and what you want to accomplish. And what I found is that intelligent creatures, we are not blessed with knowledge of the world around us. That's something that we have to discover and we have to guess at and we have to get better at. Where control theory is about we know exactly what we want and how it works. And it's more or less, if you have a this is terrible. People who understand it are going to be mad, but in general, if you have a thermostat and you set it for a temperature and it goes, turns the heater on, and then it gets to a certain temperature and it turns it off. At some point, it's just going to be like, turning on and off. And control theory is more about smoothing that out, anticipating when to turn on and off, and doing that, a lot less crude. I still don't fully understand how a PID controller works, but that's what it's about, and I think it's cool and interesting. I don't think it has any. I think using this terminology to refer to anything in neuroscience or AI is. I have not found any places where they've really lined up. Not good or bad, but again, interesting. Okay, the term layman. This is a more piss me off kind of thing. Layman comes from Catholicism, where is a hierarchical organization. You have the Pope, you have your cardinals, you have priests, you have deacons, and you have the laity. They are the peasants. And it really has nothing to do with these people intelligence, with their spirituality, with their ethics. It's a simple authoritarian structure. When science people talk about the laymen, what they really mean are non-experts, beginners and intermediates. I am a beginner at, I don't know, is there something? Oh, Blender. Oh, I've been trying to learn Blender and it's not going well. But I figure I'll get it once I get the basics down. I'll practice with it and learn more. I'll become intermediate. And then once I have 10,000 hours in Blender, I'll be an expert. And that's never going to happen. So don't say layman. Layman is authoritarian. Say non-expert. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is good. All right? We should always use what we already know to compare against new information. People who say that confirmation bias is bad, are people that want you to throw out everything that you already know so that you believe their nonsense. This is a common tool for misinformers, and don't listen to them. always, always don't throw away everything you know about something just because somebody is calling you close-minded. No. If they want to talk about something that contradicts your beliefs, then I think the burden of proof is on them. Okay, addictive. Addictive is really worked its way into our pop culture lexicon um, as a bad thing. Um, Such and such is addictive. I was just watching a documentary about Jody Hildebrandt, the life coach or whatever she was of Ruby Frankie, who broke up her marriage and tortured her children. And what she was into was porn addiction. So if she was counseling a couple and the husband, say, watched porn once in the entire year, then he had an addiction and that they should get divorced. Um, a lot of religious organizations are using addiction terminology to sort of co-opt psychiatry speak, psychology speak, and to attack things that they don't like. Uh, there's no such thing as addiction. Anything that feels good or feels bad is habit forming, and it doesn't matter if it's a good habit or a bad habit. Um, Everything's habit forming. And that's not necessarily bad. It's good to learn good habits. Sometimes we get bad habits and it's difficult to work through those. But addiction is not really something that is real. There's dependency. Like if you took a drug so much that if you stopped taking it, you could be physically harmed. That's bad. Don't do that. Uh, but it really has nothing to do with habit or addiction. It has to do with good behavior and bad behavior. So addiction, I don't listen to that. Also, dopamine goes right around. Everybody's like, oh, the dopamine hit. Oh my gosh, social media. It's the dopamines and the addiction. And if I so rarely hear people use the term dopamine and actually know what they're talking about, because the truth is we don't really know what it does. It's one of dozens of neurotransmitters that do a multitude of different complicated things. There's Stop using dopamine. All right, just stop talking about it. It's not what you think it is. Okay, here's a bad one. Qualia. I spend a lot of time wasting reading about consciousness and being on our consciousness on Reddit, and qualia is a big thing. It's sort of from the philosophical perspective of consciousness, and it unfortunately the definition of qualia is something that is by its very nature unobservable. Therefore, it is not scientific. And if you say to me, oh, how do you solve the hard problem of consciousness? There isn't a hard problem of consciousness because it is inherently unfalsifiable. Sorry. Uh, I don't even want to talk about it. We're just moving on. And then the last one is involved with. It's like what I said earlier, how it might be said the limbic system is involved with emotion. Uh, Involved with is a terminology you use when correlated to is much too strong. you know, Involved with is people are like, oh, correlation isn't causation. It's like, yeah, we want models. We want models that give us predictions. We want models that explain causation. We don't always get that. Sometimes we just get models that are like, well, we often see these two things at the same time. That's correlation. Not nearly as useful, still useful. I would argue that correlation has a lot of value and it's worth looking into. Involved with is like correlated, kind of. Is it positively, negatively correlated? We don't know. It's something, when something happens to this, something happens over there. It goes up, down, I don't know. Involved with if you can't even say correlated to, don't say involved with. All right. So many words I hate. Um so my last, oh, was this? There we go. Okay, I saved the worst for last. Cognitive cognition. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. I hate this term, and there is no alternative. Just if you feel like you need to say cognitive or cognition, then maybe you really need to think about what it is that you're even trying to say. Um, of all the words that I do not use, I like to believe that I don't use that word the most. It brings no clarity or understanding. It means nothing. All it does is like sound super fancy jargon. And yeah, it is. I'm getting an emotional reaction. See, um, which emotion? Anger, frustration. I don't know. Uh, but I do think there are legitimate, logical reasons that this word should not be used. So let's take a look. I start with my Merriam Webster's dictionary, a very useful tool, especially in a world where everybody's trying to say that words have no meaning and truth is relative. You can always like, actually, words do have meaning. I have a book right here that proves it. The good book. I'll lay my right hand on the good book and I'll read their definition of cognitive: relating to or being conscious, intellectual activity as thinking, remembering, reasoning, or using language. That is exactly what it says. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Relating to or being conscious, intellectual activity. It seems a little odd, but anyhow, it's sort of anything brain. Thinking, remembering. Remember we talked about memory? Remember those times? Those were good times. I remember them well. Reasoning. What's the difference between thinking and reasoning? I don't know. Doesn't say. Using language? Wait a minute. Is a text to speech program cognitioning? It's using language technically. Um, the you see, even in the basic definition, it's sort of anything mind related. What it is specifically is, I guess, left as an exercise to the reader. Going to Wikipedia, their quick definition, well, I mean, they go on and on, but the best thing to a definition, they say cognitions are mental processes that deal with knowledge involving the acquisition, transformation, storage, retrieval, and use of information. So basically, a computer. A computer has cognitions. There's no other way to read it. There's this, the question of, can a computer be intelligent? If so, how? Fascinating. I mean, that's what drives me. That's my main interest here. If we understood intelligence enough that we could actually get it to work on a computer, that would be proof that, yeah, maybe we knew what we were talking about. But it says cognitions are mental processes. So does that mean it's not a computer? But if it deals with knowledge, acquisition, transformation, storage, retrieval, and use, I mean, a computer does all those things. And then Wikipedia goes on the types of cognitive processes. They list perception and attention. Somehow those are grouped into the same thing. I think they're two completely different things. Memory and learning. Again, those are two different things and they're grouping them into one thing. And then they say thinking and language. And again, it's almost just like a haphazard grab bag, a random bucket full of mental processes that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. And I mean, I talk about consciousness a lot and our consciousness, and I'm perfectly fine with that term. I believe consciousness is something. It is a real thing. It's part of our experience. But cognition isn't consciousness. What part of our mind is cognition? Is it consciousness, sensory perception, feelings, memories, thoughts, fears, hypnagogic states? I mean, if you can't narrow it down any more than just the blanket of cognition, then I'm not sure what you're trying to say. I'm sure you can use, if you used another word, it might expose you, thought stuff, or brain things. Um, there's no mathematical algorithm to cognate. Um, it's just this junk term that masquerades as something really deep and complex, but it doesn't bring anything but confusion and just more meaningless words. So, if I had a public service announcement now, I would say, out of everything, please do yourself and everyone else around you a favor. Remove this word from your vocabulary. The world thanks you. I thank you. And until next time, please care for yourself and make good decisions.